in that rotation that was was a key member for them. Good on the defensive side. He went through that shooting slump, but he got it back in the finals and was huge for them. So that was another piece of that trade. But they weren't going to win a title with DeRozan. They'd already had that team even when they were younger. And you saw DeRozan go to San Antonio and watch them get bounced in the first round. So he's just a guy that's a great player. He's a great regular season player, but he's limited in his game because he's just more of an offensive threat, a mid-range guy, doesn't do a lot with the three, and he doesn't play defense. So it's going to limit you when you bring in a guy like Kawhi that does everything. And I think that's what stood out to me with Kawhi the most was just how his game has grown. Everybody talked about him from the defensive side and his ability to get to the bucket, but his handle, his mid-range game, the three ball, I mean, Eric, he can do everything for them. His game is just so expansive. And I don't know if last year when he wasn't playing, if he was just working on different elements, because it felt like we hadn't seen him in so long. When he got on the big stage, I mean, every single night, it just was like, when this guy wants to go, the Warriors have no answer for him, especially with no KD. And they were throwing Draymond at him and Klay at him. And really the only success they had was when they were just running doubles at him. And it was like, we're just going to live or die with the role guys killing us. So that's to me why I look at this as the trade that there's nothing that can compare it to because no one's ever been able to just get a guy in 1 year, come in, be the superstar on their team and go get them a title. I think Oklahoma City had that thought in their mind when they went to get Paul George, like, okay, we're just going to make one run, hopefully get as far as we can and sell them on it. Toronto not only did that, they got the title as well. And I think if they have to blow it up, they were probably going to be in the position to have to do that anyways with this DeRozan and Lowry, just the contracts that they had. And if Kawhi leaves, you blow it up. You get rid of Gasol, you get rid of Lowry, get rid of Danny Green, you build this team around Siakam, go into the draft, you try to get younger, and you just go back to the drawing board, I think. But hey, they got a title now, so they've elevated the franchise, and Toronto fans are happy. All right, Eric, as we head towards the end of segment one here, we got to take this back to the Warriors side of it as well, because, boy, I don't know even a situation to compare this to in terms of what this franchise saw happen to them in a 72-hour period with two of the most catastrophic injuries that any players can suffer. And it's two of their three superstars, two of their three main scoring threats on this team. I can't even imagine it would be like the Heat if in one night you had LeBron go down and the next game Dwayne Wade go down or something like that. It would just be unfathomable to happen. And it happens in the NBA finals of all things to happen. Now, Durant really wasn't a factor. We didn't even know if he was going to play, but you had Klay going crazy there in game 6. He was having one of those Klay games. So maybe they skate by. They finally get a win at home in this series and they go to game 7. But Eric, I had no faith that they were going to win in game 7 anyways in this series. So we take this from a Warriors perspective, but just when you saw those two injuries happen within 72 hours, what was the first thing? Were you thinking short term of, oh my God, the dynasty is over? Or were you thinking more of like, oh my gosh, what happens to this Warriors team next year? Because no matter what happens in free agency, they're in a really tough situation with what had just happened to them in this span where it looks like it's just going to be a Steph and Draymond show, and God only knows what other cap room they're going to have.
Well, I got to tell you, I mean, you and I are both in medicine in our regular careers, and I've seen a lot of knee surgeries as a result of MCL, PCL, and ACL tears. So I texted you as soon as Klay went down, and I said the lateral movement in his knee when he landed is not good. And I just kind of had a sick feeling in my gut that he had torn. I actually was thinking maybe MCL at first, but when you have that much lateral turn, ACL is always going to be a potential problem there. And so when they did come out, obviously, and say ACL, I just couldn't believe it. And to answer your question, the first thought in my mind was, okay, ACL for a basketball player, that's 7 to 9 months, if not longer. And, Durant being the size that he is, a 7-footer. And like we joked last week, his Achilles is like 4 feet long. We don't know what the recovery is going to be like on that. And so there goes next season. I mean, I don't know how you look at that other than the fact that two of your biggest stars, even if they were to re-sign with you, will not be playing for, I think, Durant all year and right. Klay 90% of the year. And look, if it's 90% of the year and it's Klay Thompson, one of the best shooters of all time, I don't play him at all. I just say, hey, 2020, you're taking the year off because you're too valuable to this franchise. I mean, you're just too good of a player to rush you back from an ACL injury. You might as well just take the year off. And the same with Durant. There is absolutely no way if they end up re-signing him somehow. And rumor is, and we'll obviously in the next part talk about free agency and trades. There's, rumors that the Warriors are going to do everything they can to re-sign these guys. Well, if that happens, I do not rush either one of them back next year. I just say it's a lost year. And that's what was going through my mind when I saw Klay land, and I'm thinking, okay, there's the ACL and that's a year. And so now you've got two. And I think what you said, it just hit me how poignant it is that what you said, because we just talked about the Raptors winning and if these injuries cheapen it a little bit, but I think you hit the nail right on the head. I mean, how would people really feel if the Bulls lost Jordan and Pippen and then lost the finals? Or if the Jazz lost Malone and Stockton? Or again, if the Cavaliers lost LeBron and Kyrie? Or LeBron and Wade for the Heat. I mean, you look at all these scenarios. What if Duncan and Kawhi go down for the Spurs years ago?
Yeah.
Any way you want to look at that, people are going to say that impacts and cheapens the championship. And so I don't know how it can't. I mean, these are KD and Klay, and I firmly believe that if both of those guys play, if we rewind to 4 weeks ago and they're both on the floor, I think the Warriors beat the Raptors. Even as good as Kawhi played, he's one guy, and I still think the Warriors overpower them. So, yeah, this is unbelievable, and what went through my mind is next year is gone.
Yeah, for sure. And look, we jumped ahead a little bit there, but I think you're right. When I think about this series, if KD had been healthy, it's a completely different series, and I think the Warriors win it. Because the problem with the Warriors in this series with no KD is they didn't have a third scorer. Now, how many teams have a third scorer? That's not really the point, though. The point is this Warriors team had been able to put themselves together in a way that they had three scorers. And that allowed them to avoid double teams. It allowed them to avoid that box and one that they were running against because they at times had not one other person outside Steph that could score, especially when Klay was hurt or out or on the bench, even in the games getting a rest. They just didn't have another guy.
Yeah, think about how important his 12 to 13 rebounds a game would have been, right, or how important it would have been to have another body to put on Kawhi Leonard. I mean, I don't think Kawhi, he's a great player, but I don't think he has the same kind of series if you have the rotation where you can throw Durant and Klay and Draymond and you have multitude of options to throw at Kawhi. I don't think he has the same impact overall. I just, you're taking a lot away when you lose Klay and KD for a whole series.
No, and you can't discount what KD, just as another body out there that can give you 35 to 45 minutes. Where in game 3, for example, they killed Steph. They put everything on Steph. Steph had a monster game, but he was absolutely gassed in game 4. He gave them nothing. You could tell he didn't have his legs. It was that quick turnaround, 48 hours they were playing again. That wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Because he would have never been asked to carry that much load. Even if Klay was out, when you have KD out there, they would have been sharing that load. So things like that within the series hurt it as well. So yeah, there's no way that you can't look at this and say, well, if KD was there, it would have been a completely different series. To the Raptors, would it have been a foregone conclusion that they would have gotten beat? No. With the way that Kawhi was playing, they would have been in and they would have won games in this series, but it would have completely changed it. The Raptors' defensive strategies would have been thrown out the window. They would have had to go in a complete different direction. They would have worked Kawhi harder on the defensive side, especially if he was working on Durant any at all. A lot of times he didn't even have to, even when he was taking a guy like Klay. Klay's more of a catch and shoot guy. Durant is more of a guy that is just offensively, you don't know what he's going to do. Is he going to take you to the bucket? Is he going to pull up? Klay's a little bit easier to guard outside of just chasing him around so many screens. So you could have gotten him into post. You could have been banging on him, just chipping him. Same thing that the Raptors did to Steph all series, just hammering him on screens. Even that play that Gasol whacked him with his knee in game 6 and you saw Steph hobbling around. Stuff like that hurts these guys. It slows you down. It's like when you're playing a video game and you keep losing bars on your life. you might still be out there, but you're just not the same guy. And that's, I think, what happened to Steph. And I just, those type of things wouldn't have had the impact if KD was out on the floor. So let me ask you this, Eric. We saw Bob Myers. He was chasing around KD and Klay. You could tell he's a guy that really cares for his players, but he's got some big decisions to make. So if you're Bob Myers, you're running the Warriors. What do you do with Klay and KD? Do you offer these guys the max? Do you offer it to one? Do you offer it to none?
Phew, talk about loaded questions, because as we just said, next year's gone. But if you say, hey, we're all in on these three guys, Steph, obviously, and then KD and Durant, one strategy that I hadn't really put much thought into is let's just throw the max at Klay and KD. And yeah, next year's gone, but then they're here after that. And we're still the Warriors. You know, we're still KD and Klay and Steph. And we've got really a core that can go on and do great things. Now, certainly at that price tag, you're not going to keep Draymond. You're not going to keep Boogie. You're not going to keep Iggy. You're not going to keep some of these other players. But I think with those three guys, you could probably get some veteran minimums and some other guys to throw in there. I mean, the Heat certainly did that, and the Cavaliers got away with a lot of that for a while there with Love and Kyrie and LeBron. So I think it's doable. And I don't think it's a bad strategy. So I do think that one of the shakeups in the free agency could be if somehow Bob Myers says, hey guys, you know, this is still a dynasty and it's not your fault that you have an injury. These are just tragic things that happened this year. Kind of, you know, it's a season that we all kind of want to come back from and show that we can still be great. So we kind of take next year, we retool a little bit, we offer you guys the max, and then we come back and do this again for 3 or 4 years.
I think when you know what you have and you know how good it can be, maybe it's worth a year's wait. Now, granted, a lot of this is a very hypothetical question because KD will control this. But if the Warriors want any chance to re-sign KD, the first step is you actually have to offer him that deal. You have to offer him that full max to get his yes or no, and you have to put the ball in his court. So that's why this becomes a topic, because in order for KD to move on from the Warriors have to basically want KD still. If they don't want him, he has to move on from him. So I think for this team, Eric, there's some really interesting things that the Warriors could do, because you know you're not going to have KD. So say those two guys sign. So Klay and KD say, you know what? That FaceTime conversation that they had talking about unfinished business, they both want to end their careers in Golden State. So they sign the max deal. Who's to say that Golden State next year in Draymond's contract year, they don't trade him and they get picks for him, or they get a lot of young, cheap guys? Who's to say that they don't say, you know what, Steph, we're going to let you play like 30 or 40 games next year. We're just going to tank. For all intents and purposes, we're going to tank. We'll have you out there at home. We'll have you in our new arena. You'll be our showcase guy. We're not even going to play you on most road games. The Warriors tank. They end up with a top 10 pick. They're in the lottery. They get another young guy, and then they come back the following year with Steph, KD, Klay, and a collection of younger guys, role players, and roll it out again for the next 3 or 4 years. That's a real possibility that I don't think people are thinking enough about, that this team could actually do. And they could reload themselves, similar to even when you think back of what the Spurs did in order to get Duncan. Robinson was hurt, and then they were just like, you know what? No, you're not coming back. We're just going to go ahead here. We'll take this number 1 pick. We'll get Tim Duncan. We'll pair you guys up for the rest of David Robinson's career. And it was the start of this huge run for the Spurs. So there is a chance that this could work out. Similar if KD decides, hey, you know what? I do want to go to the Knicks. Well, if KD goes to the Knicks and he doesn't play, the Knicks are going to still suck. So they could end up, again, a team that ends up with a top 5 pick, come back the next year with KD, and then you've got a case where you've got a KD, a Kevin Knox, a Dennis Smith Jr., an RJ Barrett, a top 5 pick from next year's draft, and you throw that on the court. So we talked about it last week. Yeah, some of the shine is off of this free agent period, but the intrigue and what could happen and how this could play out and how this impacts the NBA is just massive, Eric. There's no free agency period like we've ever had like this, with the star power and now all these questions up in the air. and then you throw in what just happened on Saturday,